Alright, what's going on, guys? Today I thought I'd do a little video on my thoughts of how we landed on the moon in 1969. I've watched this documentary which is called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. Raises some pretty good fucking points. Not saying that it's 100% true, but I'll put the link in the description so you guys can watch the whole thing, because I'm only going to point some little things that I thought needs to be noted. But yeah, so we'll jump straight into it. Right, so I just want to quickly point out here, this is something they mentioned about the moon rovers that they took down to search around and everything like that they could drive, fucking yeah, blah blah blah. And she's pointed out a very good fact here of how much these things cost, and there's not much on them. I'll just quickly play the video, but I could almost guarantee that if they're trying to say that this is how much those vehicles had cost, yeah, play.
The cost of the 3 moon rovers in 21st century currency? Nearly $60 million each, though they had fewer parts than a Jeep.
$60 million. Well, hang on a second. What do we see? It's hard to look at. I can see there's definitely one. There's definitely 2 wheels. I could say there's 4, but fuck you, who knows? Who knows if there's even 2 more wheels on there? They're probably fucking. What's this? This looks, yeah. It's a bit strange. $60 million fucking dollars each. I'm guessing, yeah, would probably. I can't really. What else these cunts got to say? Let's just have a listen.
Certainly, it was not possible to fool just the Soviets about US strategic capability in the 1960s, while somehow informing 200 million Americans of the truth secretly. In order for them to believe the United States had the capability to go to the moon, everyone would have to believe it.
Yeah.
Furthermore, the pride of a nation was at stake, and the goal of a martyr, not to mention the growing unrest domestically of a government throwing tens of thousands of lives away in a foreign war riddled with contradiction and ambiguity. In addition, the Apollo program had already spent billions of dollars. If it failed to achieve its goal with such an investment, it would indeed be a large and bitter pill for the taxpayers to swallow. The cost of the program, whose sole goal was to be the first to plant a flag on the lifeless rock just outside the Earth, if adjusted for inflation to the 21st century, was $135 billion. With a profit margin of just 7%, this would be equal to over $9 billion profit going to the privileged contractors chosen by their friends at NASA.
Oh, chosen by their friends at NASA. Interesting.
If the machinery was in fact only achieving Earth orbit, as other earlier missions had already done, then the completion and functionality of the other components would not have been as important, and even more profit would have been made.
Shit, yeah.
$135 billion could feed 2 million people for their entire lives. It could also buy 2 million 2-bedroom houses. Yet how could such an undertaking be kept sacred, and for such a long time? To the latter, one needs only to remember that an unsolved riddle 6 years older, the assassination of President Kennedy, still daunts the minds of the vast majority of Americans.
Now that is... Got questions to ask on that, don't you? Really? Like, I know this is just another show, but come on, fucking hell. Alright, so I'm just going to quickly show also the part where they try to point out news networks were getting, they had to take it off this, which is coming off this, which is coming off a projector screen. It was fucking terrible quality. Why couldn't NASA just say, well, here, we'll give you the direct input link. We have nothing to fucking hear. Well, let's see what we've got here.
over a 3-year period. Yet the secret did not get out. A quarter century later, the art and technology of espionage inevitably improved, narrowing dramatically the number of players in the know of a large clandestine operation. Just 1 year before the first mission to the moon, NASA launched the Tetra satellite, specifically designed to simulate flight data coming from the moon, so that the ground crews could rehearse the landing, much as the astronauts did in their own simulations.
That picture looked...
Had it not supposedly fallen back to Earth, all that would have been needed during the actual flight would be a repeat of one of these computer programs, with a few original variations, transmitted to the satellite for rebroadcast to Houston. Scores of computers and their deceived operators on the ground would then receive prearranged information, including the alleged location, altitude and fuel consumption of the spacecraft, as if it were descending to the moon's surface. If the Soviets tried to find the actual location of an Apollo crew in the hundreds of thousands of miles surrounding the Earth and the moon, it would be tantamount to trying to find a rowboat in the Atlantic Ocean. The fact that the Apollo program was so departmentalized, with various construction and test sites around the country, meant that only a few people saw the whole picture. And for the first time ever, there was no independent press coverage of such an historical event. Whatever pictures and sound were distributed to the public were strictly controlled and previewed by the federal government. They were then disseminated unchecked until this hour. For who would realize that the unthinkable was not only possible, but absolutely true?
No, that's another thought. Why would they have to, you know? You're doing something like that, you don't need to lie about it. It's very strange. Again, maybe there's answer A, answer B, we had to do this, but fucking calm the fuck on. Let's be realistic. Anyway. Now we'll just play this last little bit, because this, well, not the last little bit, but this is another very interesting point about how they point out shadows, and I'll play it and then I'll talk about it and I'll see what, if you want to, you can comment and let me know what you think.
Unchecked until this hour. For who would realize that the unthinkable was not only possible, but absolutely true?
I'm not sure. Like, there could be reasonable, but let's have a look. Let's have a look.
And what of the photographs? What do they tell us? On 3 separate occasions, our office asked NASA's Public Relations Department for every single picture of an astronaut on the surface of the moon, just during the maiden voyage of Apollo 11. Many duplicates were sent. In all, fewer than 20 pictures were found, including first-hand investigation on site at the agency's vaulted archives.
20 photos?
Quite surprising, considering the historical significance of the event.
Fucking hell.
These very photographs are the same ones circulated year after year on anniversary commemorations.
Come on.
It is estimated that in just the first 60 minutes on the moon, motivated by the tenuous nature of the circumstances, many more exposures could have been expediently taken.
And look, this guy's taking a photo.
Also surprising is the scarcity of photographs of the mission's chief pioneer, Neil Armstrong.
What the fuck?
The greatest achievement in human history, and of the man whose first step echoed around the world, dawning a new age of scientific enlightenment. There is only one full-body picture of him on the moon, besides this ghostly reflection. This one, taken by an automatic camera mounted on the side of the lunar module. Perhaps he feared liability should the whole conundrum later become unraveled.
Fuck, I would.
Perhaps he has forgotten that he attested to the authenticity of the event with his signature on this plaque engraved by the federal government. In fact, in the more than 30 years since the event, aside from NASA's initial press conference and the occasional brief anniversary remarks where few questions were permitted, he has never given one on-camera interview to anyone, ever.
Now, I'm sorry, but even if it was, 50 years ago, or whatever, 50, I think. He doesn't want to talk. Why? Let's see what else he's got to say.
From an analytical standpoint, photographic anomalies have to be sought out with an understanding of lighting and shadows.
Correct.
The most straightforward is simple. When objects are lit solely by the sun, as all the scenes on the moon were said to be, after all, lighting equipment was not only impractical, it was unnecessary in bright sunlight, then all shadows, regardless of the landscape, will run parallel with one another and never intersect, as shown by this example.
100%.
In these seldom seen photographs, obtained from a rarely used auxiliary NASA archival site, it is clear that these scenes were lit with artificial light. These shadows, which are cast at different angles, are evidence that a second light source is being used.
Well, maybe they could...
In addition, the sun would not cause an isolated hotspot like this. Only an artificial light would. Again, intersecting shadows and another hotspot.
Shadow coming up.
And again.
Straight. Oh,
and again.
well...
It is simply impossible for this picture to have been taken with sunlight on the moon.
Maybe it wasn't, but...
Here, the shadows are shown to be as black as pitch.
You wouldn't see in the dark.
And yet here, completely in a shadow, the astronaut is lit up like a Christmas tree.
You can see in the dark.
How can this be?
Oh, a different angle.
Or this, on the shadow side of the lunar module.
I'm not sure what I'm looking at there, honestly.
In this magnification of an Apollo photograph, a rock, very likely a papier-mâché prop because of the crease here, is categorized with the letter C.
How do you know that?
In later releases of the same picture, the letter is
That
gone,
could be a cut in
probably
the rock.
airbrushed out.
What? Well, why would they even...
Here, a crosshair, which was burned directly into the image from the film plate, and thus should always appear on top of the objects in the photograph,
Well,
appears behind the object in this
that's
scene,
different.
clearly revealing a composite of two pictures into one.
Now, just quickly, if there is if anyone's really good at this kind of stuff, is there a reasonable, like, maybe the crosshair thing, I don't know, honestly, I'm not sure, but is there? I'll put it in just to make sure, but...
Someone apparently forgot to create a burn crater underneath the lunar module's 10,000-pound thrust engine, despite the fact that during ground tests there was a real concern for the vehicle falling into the hole the engine created as it descended. Here is a depiction based on the latest specifications and scientific data. In these enlargements, it looks as though the lunar module was simply placed there. Not even one speck of moon dust on the landing pod. As a result, all subsequent flights had to have the same discrepancy, which was explained away by the effect of no atmosphere.
That is I was going to say, but hang on, can I go back to that one just for a second?
As a result,
Shut up. Where is it? Show me the one with the moon. How do you know?
underneath the
How do we
lunar
know if there's
module's
no atmosphere?
10,000-pound thrust engine, despite the fact that during ground tests
How do we know
there was
that
a real concern for the vehicle falling
the
into
dust
the
wouldn't
hole
just
the engine
constantly-
created as it descended.
You know, instead of...
Here is a
fuck's sakes, where
depiction
is it?
based on the latest specifications and scientific
Don't worry,
data.
I'll wait.
In these enlargements, it looks as though the lunar module was simply placed there. Not even one...
I don't know. I haven't been to the moon again, so I don't know what it's like up there, but...
speck of moon dust on the landing
So you're
pod.
pointing out these things.
As a
but-
result, all subsequent flights had to have the same discrepancy, which was explained away by the effect of no
Well, I guess there
atmosphere.
wouldn't be atmosphere, there'd be no wind.
And what about stars? On the moon, with no atmosphere, they must have been quite a sight to behold. Yet there is seldom any mention of them, if ever, by any of the astronauts on any of the missions. Undoubtedly, creating a mural with all the constellations properly placed in the sky would have been virtually impossible to create accurately,
fucking
much less realistically. A competent amateur astronomer would have been able to call attention to the slightest error in measurement. The answer? Not to talk about the stars. Ever.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In their post-flight press conference, it was the only question to which Neil Armstrong responded with an absence of memory.
And I have watched this. I just quickly want to mention old mate that is sitting to Neil Armstrong's left. After the question is made, he says something. Neil mumbles something under his breath, and watch his body language. He sort of says, "Oh fuck," Shut the fuck up. Alright? Tell me what you think.
When you looked up at the sky, could you actually see the stars and the solar corona in spite of the glare?
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon by eye without looking through the optics. I don't recall during the period of time that we were photographing the solar corona what stars we could see.
This guy?
I don't remember seeing any.
Now Neil says, fuck up, cunt.
Years later,
Jesus
though,
Christ,
Michael
cunt.
Collins...
I told you not to say anything, for fuck's sakes. And that's... He's very... Look, they're all very... Fucking, I don't know. Now, this is another interesting that is going to pop up. I was going to forget to mention, but I remember now.
would remember seeing the elusive stars and wrote about them in Expeditions to the Moon. It seems his memory improved the older he got.
As it does, of course.
Why don't stars appear in any of the photographs? Simply because the proper, mostly closed exposure setting for the camera's iris set that way to compensate for the bright sunlight.
Okay, and here again, like I do believe this. What's this here? How do we know that's not a star there? I'm sure I've seen other ones.
On the moon's surface, completely diminished the faintness of relatively distant specks of diminutive light.
Yeah, just pop one of those in.
This answer is true. It does not, however, explain why they never took any pictures of the stars by themselves, with an exposure setting perfect for them.
Absolutely.
While they took 3 automobiles to the moon, they never took a photographic telescope. Had they done so, they would have been able to see farther into the universe than had ever before been realized.
Imagine, and you'd be prepared.
If they had taken a telescope,
you're going to go to the fucking moon. You're going to say, I need this, I need that telescope, I need fucking this.
and were not actually on the moon, they would have had to concoct undiscovered galaxies that might one day prove to be non-existent. The cost of the 3 moon rovers in 21st century currency,
I'll have to skip through this, sorry.
nearly $60 million.
Each, yeah, we have seen that, so I'll edit this part out.
Still shot of the flag, assuming that it was the astronauts inside after all, on the atmosphereless moon. We can only guess that most of the missions were staged inside, for fear of possible...
I'll have to edit that.
Then there's the flag, blowing in the wind, at least twice, on the atmosphereless moon. We can only guess that most of the missions were staged inside, for fear of possible aerial or satellite reconnaissance from an unfriendly nation.
Google Maps.
The backpacks, designed for 1/6 gravity, must have had the cooling systems removed to allow for movement without falling over. With very near and hot studio lighting, that left one hot astronaut inside. Assuming that it was the astronauts inside after all, their faces were always covered.
Oh, well, they can't take that.
The necessary mammoth amounts of air conditioning were probably responsible for the air current.
That's definitely a fucking blow in the wind. I'm sorry if anybody's been on Earth before and you feel that wind. And apparently that cannot happen on the moon because there are questions to be asked there, unfortunately.
Here
questions.
the editor cuts to a still shot of the flag, just as the effect becomes noticeable. Here it is unchecked. This rare clip, attained decades ago, was never re-released with the inevitable increase in experience and scrutiny. To demonstrate 1/6 gravity, a bouncy, floaty feel to the astronauts' movements would be similarly achieved with relative simplicity. Slow motion.
Yeah.
You are viewing the scenes as they aired more than 30 years ago.
No, they'll speed it up.
Now let's look at them with the speed doubled.
Okay.
It becomes discernible that they are, in fact, in Earth's gravity.
Now, I 100%, that's true, but if you really were in space and, I guess if you were pushing up, you wouldn't come back. I don't know. I haven't been to the moon, so, but...
And are no more leaving the ground than they would on Earth.
Yes, I know.
It is clear from these rarely seen colour television pictures that the crew of Apollo 11 brought a high-resolution colour video camera with them on their mission.
Let's have a look.
Yet the only pictures broadcast live from the moon's surface were these from a low-definition black and white camera. In fact, the networks complained because in addition to this, they were forced to shoot the images second generation off of a projection TV of the technology of 30 years ago and were not even allowed to take a direct feed, which further degraded the quality and clarity of the images.
Why couldn't, like, this is a fucking massive event that is happening right now. Well, that has happened. Why would we not be able to get, like, the best view? Everyone wants to see it. Everyone wants to know what's happening. Why would we fucking...
Perhaps this was precisely what NASA and the federal government had in mind.
Suspicious.
After all, it was a first, regardless of where they were.
Again.
Better to open up their debut mission with fuzzy pictures and numerous blackouts, rather than show too much revealing detail of a false scene that was yet unproven.
So that is true as well. But again, like I said, this is my raw thoughts. I think that she's got good points, but maybe there is legitimate. Well, we couldn't, they're so far away, fucking blah, 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 blah.
And
blah,
finally,
blah.
the element that seals their...
Now this is this is what confuses me. We all need to pay attention to this. I'll probably put this at the start, but why would they fucking lie like this? Okay, sorry, I'll just spacebar.
Faint. Of all the footage of Apollo 11 requested from NASA over a 5-year period, one gem was discovered just before the completion of this documentary. An old reel received by mistake.
Oops.
It contains the raw or unedited footage of the crew.
By mistake, or did someone that sent it said, you cunts need to figure this shit out? Come on, here.
Crew of Apollo 11, Michael Collins, Edwin Aldrin Jr. and Neil Armstrong, staging part of their mission for nearly an hour in living color, with exceptionally clear behind-the-scenes audio of conversations discussing the techniques used to achieve a disingenuous picture depicting the Earth at a distance, in order to falsely demonstrate their far journey from it and their ability to survive passing through the Van Allen radiation belts.
Well, yeah, that's
It
right.
cannot be misconstrued that this staging was done for some other reason prior to the mission, for the reel itself is slated and dated July 18th, 19th and 20th, 1969, the very days of the mission when they were said to be approaching and achieving lunar orbit. Furthermore, it is apparent they are in genuine zero gravity aboard the actual spacecraft, necessary to convince the mass media of their authenticity, just not any further than Earth orbit, as you will see.
You'd be able, yeah.
In this never-before-seen or heard footage, not only is the radio conversation between the astronauts and Houston Control audible, there is a secondary, private conversation taking place between the crew and a third confidential party, prompting the astronauts with what to say, when to speak, and how to effectively manipulate the camera to achieve the desired misleading effect. NASA claims that the Houston transmissions were the only ones taking place with the astronauts. Listen now as Houston Control initiates a conversation with the crew, only to find them too preoccupied with the behind-the-scenes trickery to respond. Moments pass, and the oversight is picked up on by the clandestine third party, who quickly prompts them with talk. Immediately, Neil Armstrong speaks.
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Okay, Roger, we're coming in on Earth.
Again, the illusion they are attempting to create is the Earth at a distance, to demonstrate their far journey from it, and their ability to survive passing through the Van Allen radiation belts. Understand, too, that only about 20 seconds of this raw footage was ever broadcast to the public, and these conversations discussing their deception were believed to be private. Until now.
Yeah.
Here they discuss that these television transmissions were in fact not broadcast live as everyone believed. They were first screened and edited for playback later.
Roger, Neil, we just wanted a narrative such that when we get to playback, we can sort of correlate what we're seeing. Thank you very much.
Here they discuss the fact that they have turned out the lights and have blocked out sunlight from entering the spacecraft through the other windows, as to not cause any reflected light to fall onto the spacecraft's wall in the foreground.
Okay, very good. Well, we shut out the sun coming in some of the other windows into the spacecraft, so it's looking through a...
Shut out the sun coming in some of the other windows into the spacecraft so that the inside walls do not show. But yet, I'm sure they said that the camera, that's the front of the aircraft, spacecraft, the camera is fucking, you can't.
The number one window, and there isn't any reflected light.
I don't understand.
The reason this was done is so that the truth of the matter would not be revealed. It is this. Though the federal government would have you believe that this is a view of Earth from a distance out of the spacecraft's window as it nears the moon, it is not. What they have ingeniously done is placed the camera at the back of the spacecraft and centered the lens on a circular window in the foreground, outside of which it is completely filled with the Earth in low orbit. The circumference of the window then appears to be the diameter of the Earth at a distance, with the darkened walls.
It looks like a fucking egg. Look at this shit. Oh yeah, well, then again, what? The planet's fucking flat, isn't it? Some dickheads think. But look at this shit. The fuck you can't have that. Look at this. What the fuck, man? Come on.
To the spacecraft, appearing to be the blackness of space around it. That is why they wanted the interior dark and blocked out the sun from entering through the other windows. Here you can see the extruded window, probably 2 inches thick at the bottom.
Oh, this thing's popped up, but you can see the glow. That little bit of glow in the shitty fucking camera view, whereas there's none. I'm guessing that's what's this up here? What the fuck is this?
This is because the Earth's shine is coming in at a downward angle. It also causes the Earth to appear to be an irregularly shaped circle, for you are seeing the outside of the window at the bottom and the inside of the window at the top, which together form 2 different sized halves of a circle. Subsequently, this take was never used. As they perfected the shot, a crescent-shaped piece of black material was inset slightly into the window to create the illusion of the Earth's terminator line dividing night and day. It is uncannily convincing. During this segment, intended to be edited and played back later for the worldwide television audience, dated July 18th, 1969, Neil Armstrong condemns himself as he states that he is 130,000 miles out, or halfway to the moon, as the NASA flight log also states on this date, when he is in reality in low Earth orbit of a few hundred miles.
No, he's not. Look at the footage.
Roger, Houston, Apollo 11. Calling in from about 130,000 miles out.
Wow, shit.
Here, during another segment, also intended to air after review,
That's amazing.
Neil Armstrong falsely explains to the viewers how the shot is attained by putting the camera's lens to the window's glass, as it would have to be if they were the claimed distance away from the
Yeah,
Earth.
so right up against glass.
We only have one window that has a view of the Earth, and it's filled up with a TV camera.
That's amazing.
If the window was completely filled up with a TV camera, as he stated, then an astronaut's arm would not be able to get between the camera and the window, as it obviously does here in this outtake.
Where?
South America becomes...
Maybe he's outside the aircraft and he didn't know that they were filming. Oh no, because they'd be travelling at really high speeds.
invisible.
Mate, I don't know, mate.
Beyond the Terminator or inside the shadow.
See, old mate's like, get out of the way, cunt.
You can also notice how the astronaut operating the camera reacted to the mistake by attempting to pan away from it.
What the fuck?
See white bands of major...
Why lie?
across the Earth.
Why? Maybe
This is a segment that they believed wasn't even being recorded, much less suitable for broadcast, for the lens was being zoomed out and the scene was being changed to that of an interior of the astronaut.
The fuck is up the top here? What's up the top there?
And apparently the stop button popped back up on the recorder without notice.
That would be
Here is the diffused work light that they used to see camera controls, but not throw...
I'm gonna say I don't believe in God, but I feel like whoever was the inventor popped that button back up to say, you can't, sir. Nah. I said...
light onto the spacecraft's wall. Here they remove part of the crescent insert.
Oh, look out. Oh my God. Well done. There should be fucking trick photographers. Not...
Finally, the iris is opened up, and you can see the real location of the camera, and the very bright and near Earth out the window.
Oh my God. What in the...
Here is the slate for the 19th of July. And the same shot of trickery on the 19th of July. And then the 20th. And the same misleading shot on the 20th.
Oh, wow.
Later that evening, they were said to be walking on the moon. How can this be when they were in Earth orbit only 9 hours earlier?
I'm just going to leave it there because I'm not sure how much I've recorded for, blah, blah, blah. But like I said, I'll put the link in the description for everyone else to watch the full thing. I'll point out a couple of things, but I don't know, honestly. Again, raw thoughts. Seems to me like a load of fucking shit. Could be some good points. Yeah, whatever. You know, again, maybe we'll find out eventually. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys. We'll see what we go next time. Shouldn't be long. I'll probably do another video the same day as it's sunny early right now, so hit the like, hit the subscribe, do what you gotta do. If not, whatever. I hope you enjoyed the video.